Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast, where we answer your sales distress calls. I'm Liz Heiman, and each week I'm joined by your crew of seasoned sales experts who have navigated these waters and come out victorious. So if you're ready to turn your sales distress into sales success, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic.
Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm your host, Liz Heiman, and I am here with your Sales SOS podcast crew, Daryl Prell, Renee Bigelow, and Mike Simmons. And today we're talking about compensating and motivating sales teams. And in this episode, we've had a couple episodes talking about this, but in this specific episode, we're going to talk about coaching and motivating, what we as sales leaders can do to help motivate. That is aside from just this is how you're going to be compensated and this is how you're going to be measured. What are the other things that we can do to get our sales teams to perform the way we want? And I will say before we start that depending upon who you read, a sales leader or sales manager's job, 30% to 70% of the time you should be coaching. Now, if you're the CEO and the sales leader, chances are you're probably not accomplishing 70% of your time coaching. But whatever measure we use, a lot of your time should be involved in coaching your sales organization, your individual players. So what are your thoughts on coaching and motivating your sales people?
I think we should just yell at them. That's been it works pretty. Sorry.
I think it's extremely effective. I've seen it work over and over again.
Over again. Yeah, it really gets the results. Yeah. It works well when too, just so you know.
When all else fails, say it louder.
Exactly.
Very motivating.
There's one I want to share because it really stands out to me, and it has always stood out to me because I've never agreed with the sandwich ratio. Say one good thing, say one bad thing, say one good thing, right? Like it's so transparent what you're doing. Frances Fry, who's a Harvard Business School professor, I met several years ago, and she has done a ton of research around this and says it really needs to be, in this like 20-to-1 ratio in order to keep employees engaged. And this is where she spends an abnormal amount of her time and is fantastic. I highly recommend that you follow her. But she recommends a 10-to-1 and that you start with a 5-to-1 because everybody's so woefully behind that a 5-to-1 is just very hard to achieve, right? That you can't throw people into a 10-to-1. So like if you're talking about motivation, you're going to have to, I think in sales in particular, you're going to be coaching them to do something differently. You're going to be giving feedback. They're getting lots of no's. They're like, it's an area this is going to come up. So you got to build that bank up, I think, as much as possible. And I think sales is probably one of those areas where you should really, really work towards 10-to-1 rather than even her suggested starting a 5-to-1.
10-to-1 meaning 10 good things for every negative thing.
I like to say, catch people doing good, right? And not only that, but when you do it, you set examples for everybody else. If you realize that there's a lot of competitive nature inside of sales teams, which is very good, you can activate that competitive nature by catching people doing good. They want to be caught doing good, right? They want to be recognized as well. So publicly, not just one-on-ones, that 10-to-1.
I had a golf coach, which would imply that I got to be a good golfer, which I never did. But I had a golf coach that I would say, what am I doing wrong? And he'd say, let's wait until you're doing something right. And then I'll tell you. Like, let's focus on what you're doing right, not on what you're doing wrong.
And you were doing everything wrong is what I take away from it.
I think that's what he was implying. And, like, he's wrong.
Exactly.
Right. But I think that there's something to be said for that. We know when we've done something wrong most of the time, and we don't need to be told that we're doing it wrong. We need help figuring out how to do it right. And so how do you have those conversations with salespeople around how do we do this right? I think several episodes ago, I said something about doing something fun, and something fun would be doing like an account review or, brainstorming about ideas to do things differently. And you guys like, well, that just sounds terrible. And that's what we think because most of our coaching conversations are negative. conversations, right? Okay, you're not doing this right. You could be doing this. You should be doing this. Next time, do this. And that is not coaching. That may be managing, but it's not coaching. And when we're coaching, what we're doing is helping the team identify what they could be doing better and helping them formulate the solution to doing it better. So if we're telling them what they're doing wrong and we're telling them what they should do next, they're neither learning nor are they feeling good, nor are they owning anything successful. Right? So if we're going to coach to success, we need to coach in a way that builds, not in a way that tears down.
So I love what you're saying. I'll say it just a little bit different. And that is, I have to create, even talking about the way that builds, to me, that looks like that you're creating an environment of trust. In other words, for me to eventually hear from you, my boss, what you think I'm doing less than optimal. How's that? Or for me to have the state, the feeling of safety enough to admit, proactively say, listen, I'm really struggling here, or I haven't been able to do that there. There has to be a feeling of trust. If I think I'm going to share something with you and then you're going to use it, and I worry you're going to use it to pip me, 2 weeks later, I'm never going to share. I'm never going to give you that. Right. So if you, as my boss, have a history of just attacking or just being type A driven and lacking any empathy or lacking any coaching skills or being unable to walk alongside me or only assume that your way is the right way, and therefore if I do it slightly different, even if I'm having success, it's wrong, I don't trust you. I won't hear anything you say, and I will become a yes man. I will tell you what you want to hear, and then I'll go do it my own way again. I'm going to actively avoid your advice. So, check for the build up. To me, that's establishing trust, which means as a leader, you need to spend that first month, 2, 3, whatever it takes, building that safe environment with that new rep before you start just tearing them down and ripping them up, right? That's what that means. But that's my experience. Mike, you're the pro here on this one. Am I out to lunch, or do you have better advice?
I think the big question, so I don't know. The big question, I don't know if you're out to lunch or if you're on point or either one of those.
Okay.
The bigger question here is like, what is a coach? Like, what is a coach? So Daryl is in, to me, what looks like a big motor coach. I think like you're in a cabin kind of area, kind of place. Yes. You got a ceiling fan. So I don't know if that thing actually has wheels or not, but you're out in this environment. Yeah. If you go back in time and you think about what a coach did, a coach was a vehicle that would help people get, or a person get from A to B, from one place to another. So we as coaches help people get from where they are to where they could potentially be. And their view of what the future might be, maybe slightly different than yours. So that might be misaligned. And sometimes you see more for them and sometimes they see more in themselves. But if a coach's objective is to help someone get from A to B, let's first understand what A is and where B is, and then put the things in place to help support it. I don't think that coaches really need to be liked. And the reason why I don't think coaches need to be liked, other than I think we've gone a bit too far with these participation trophies out there, is the coach objective is get from A to B. If both of us are aligned on getting from both A to B, and the coach can do the job, helping the person see different, move their feet on a pedal, or move their feet properly when they're skating, or work on hand position when stick handling, like all of these things, they can start to see things that the person doesn't see themselves because they're so deep into the challenge that I did that for you, Daryl, the hockey stuff. So that because they're so into the challenge that they can't see beyond their skis or where they're at. So let's first define what a coach is. And then let's also work through the process of saying, what's the objective of the coaching? And then let's go through and say, do we agree? Are we aligned on that objective? because if you're not aligned on that objective, I don't care what kind of coach you are or what kind of coaching you provide, you're not going to help somebody get from A to B if your B is different than their B, or their A is different than their A, or somebody else has a different perspective in there.
So the one thing I love what you're saying, it's getting alignment on, where we are and where we want to go. I'll go back to what I was saying on the trust thing, only just because it's contextual to what Mike is saying, is you can get that alignment. But if the sales rep has got some legacy baggage, a bad boss, a bad past coach, then that's where the trust comes in. And so you just need to be self-aware as the coach that when you hire that rep, you're hiring all the bad and the good of their previous career. And that's going to be part of your challenge to deal with or to exploit, to begin.
Think about how hard communication is when you're communicating with someone who has all of this kind of technical or organization or relationship debt, like your dog getting snapped at every once in a while. Like at some point, that dog is just going to start shaking and quivering over in the corner of learned helplessness. But if they get through this period where they've had to deal with this fog or this veil of, every time I've shared, I've gotten it, it comes back out, comes back up and gets me. Then you've got a lot of relationship stuff to overcome. And to build on Daryl's point, it goes far beyond the people that they've worked with. Think about where they were raised, what their family life was like, how, like all of that kind of stuff. Like there's so much baggage. And many of us really struggled with being open and honest, that self-awareness piece that we talked about in the first piece, being open and honest around what our strengths are, what are our weaknesses, what do we want to get better at? So these are all of the layers that you have to peel apart before you get to the point where communication really can happen effectively, which is why it makes all of this stuff so freaking hard, especially as teams build and noise increases.
Liz, can I want to share an anecdote of one thing that in my role in marketing, I'm often in sales meetings. In some companies I've worked in, like super large organizations, sometimes I'm under a same umbrella with sales too, right? So I sit in a ton of sales meetings. I actually get to sit in them without being in the hot seat most of the time. So it gives me a chance to get this perspective over like really well-run ones without like that same emotional like feeling that happens for a lot of people, like what's going to get brought up, how am I going to get called out, whatever. And one of my favorite examples that I've seen, and I've seen it done a few ways and a little bit different in different places, but is that cross between training and coaching when it's done in the sales meeting and when you involve peers. So in one-on-ones, you are recognizing, especially if you are doing that complimenting on a regular basis and looking for catching people doing good, right? And you are coming up with these different scenarios where somebody has done something really great, or maybe they've had something that was super challenging and they somehow got over it. And you sit in all those one-on-ones, or enough of them that this is a recurring problem for multiple people. Having that person getting them comfortable enough where they're willing to share, right? And then having that person come into the sales meeting and setting aside 5 minutes or 10 minutes of each sales meeting for this kind of training, coaching hybrid that's peer-led, where you're moderating and driving this discussion, but you're letting the salesperson share their whatever they overcame, whatever their best practices, whatever that's working. Right. And it's even better if there's something juicy and gnarly that was bad in the beginning and they turned it into something good and everybody's experiencing it. Right. And then letting the other people directly ask them questions. Well, wait, how did you do this? Because this is the horror story I've dealt with, and really backing out and not giving judgment around the questions that people ask, so that peers are helping rise the tide for all the other peers in the room. I find that takes, it takes humility from the sales leadership to turn that over, right? But it also elevates a lot of salespeople who want to be recognized for their skills, right? In a way, in front of their peers. But it also improves trust, because this is somebody in the trenches who's dealing with the same problems, and even if you don't ask questions, you're hearing, right? So it's not just you, the sales manager, saying, this is what you should do. You're hearing, this is what your peers are doing. So even if you're resistant to it, it's going to get through in a different way.
So I think it's a good time to sort of differentiate some things. As a sales leader, you have different kinds of meetings or conversations. So you have these sales team meetings, and you have several different kinds of one-on-ones. You also have trainings that are group trainings. You may include your training in your team coaching, but you have other kinds of meetings with your individual sales reps. You have funnel reviews, you have coaching sessions, and you then also have sessions where you're talking about, are you hitting your goals, and what are you going to do to hit your goals? Maybe you're putting a PIP in place because somebody isn't hitting their goals, a performance improvement plan. So if we, as a sales leader, start to think about, there's these different kinds of meetings that I'm having, and what kind of behavior is happening in these different meetings. So I love the idea of having a sales meeting where we do a little bit of training. We also do a little bit of brainstorming together, right? Here's a problem I keep hearing in the funnel reviews. We're getting stuck here. How are you guys handling it? I keep hearing the same objection. Let's talk about it. What are some cool ways to handle it? Maybe somebody has a strategic account that they're trying to close and they can't. Let's do an account plan in the meeting for 15 minutes, right? How do we use that time in a way that is not just, you guys, you got to hit your number, you got to hit your number, or everybody report. Let's take an hour with 10 of you, everybody report, and everybody else sit there quietly while everybody else is reporting, right? So if we think about, how do I best use the different kinds of meetings that I have to motivate my team toward the behaviors that I want them to have, I will be more successful. So if I think about that team meeting, what are the things that I can do that will inform and motivate? If I'm having a funnel review, what are the things that I can do that will be learning for both of us about what's going on, and maybe add a little coaching in? If I'm doing just a coaching session, hey, this happens, often when we're doing a funnel review. Let's talk about, how do we address that? And then there's this last one, which is, you're not performing or you are performing. And if you're not performing, we have two ways to handle that. One is I can tell you what you're going to do. Two is we can come up with a plan together about how we're going to solve it. So as a leader, I have to think about, how do I want to address each of these activities? Am I telling? Am I learning? Or are we building it together? And which of those is going to motivate the team to achieve what I want them to achieve? And I don't think there's a right answer. Different times, different ways work better.
Yeah, I agree. So agree. The other, a couple of words came up in this. One was coach, one was train. Another one that gets thrown out is mentor, and know which tool you are going to apply to the right situation based on the job to be done, and purpose that you're trying to fulfill. Sometimes people get into the trap that's been talked about so far a couple of different times in different ways, where they believe that they're coaching, but actually what they're doing is training. And the worst ones, the worst ones are the situations where you join a member of your team and you think that you're going to help coach him up in a sales call. And instead what you do is you take over the call because you have to demonstrate the reason why you're in the room. And all that does is hurt the relationship that your rep has with their customer. It hurts the capability of that rep to go do the work that needs to be done. And it undermines your ability to continue to develop members of your team. So is the solution coaching, training, or mentoring? Do I have the right people doing those things? Is it being done at the right time, in the right order? And I mean, unfortunately, all of this stuff is really complex because we're dealing with human beings, and each of those humans has about 6 inches of gray matter between their ears. And a lot of times that gray matter is helping them think or feel different things than might ultimately be the reality.
I think the one thing that is clear, though, if we want to encourage motivate our team to do certain things. The philosophy of the whippings will continue until morale improves is not a good one, right? Being louder is not necessarily better. Saying it for the 35th time is not necessarily better. So we want to make sure that we are, we're motivating and encouraging. We're not beating.
Didn't we open up the whole conversation by saying we should beat them? I thought that's how we did that.
Well, and yell louder. Yeah.
Louder. Okay.
You guys
Okay,
talk slower. Talk slower too.
Okay. If I say it slow enough,
There we go.
maybe you will understand.
Yes. Maybe I shouldn't be a coach. That's all we're going to say right there.
Sure.
So,
Any last thoughts on this before we wrap up our day?
Since we're talking motivation, you started us off with this, and I'm gonna sort of bring us at least close to the close with make it fun. There's not enough fun, and again, I get to sit in a lot of different ones of these, particularly now with how working as a fractional CMO, right? More than when I was inside of companies, and I see a broader variety, and many are not fun. There's always room for a little fun.
agreed.
Well, thanks for joining us for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. Your crew will be here next month, the second Friday on LinkedIn Live, and you can find us anywhere that you where podcasts are available. You can find us and join us on our past episodes. Happy selling, everybody.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. A huge thank you to our experts for throwing us a lifeline with their insights. We hope that episode has equipped you to navigate sales leadership with confidence. Never miss an episode. Subscribe to your Sales SOS podcast on your favorite platform. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like us to explore, join us live on LinkedIn every second Friday, or share your questions on LinkedIn or YouTube. Until next time, keep sailing toward your sales goal.